Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey there, everybody. It's Debbie Potts, the host of the Whole Athlete Podcast. And today you are listening to a special edition of my Friday episode on performance, gains, and longevity. How can we train and race and compete in endurance events or any athletic events and improve our performance as we get older, as well as how can we improve our health from the cellular level? So as I say, training from and improving our health from the inside out in order to improve the aging process. We should be looking at longevity, not just how well we perform this year, but how well are you going to be feeling and moving and thinking and traveling, and the list goes on when you're 70, 80, 90 years old. I have a lot of personal training clients I've had for 20 plus years that are now, they're in their 70s and they are rocking it. They're fit, strong, healthy individuals. They take ownership of their health. They train with me twice a week, but they also, they'll be open to naturopaths, functional medicine, lab testing, acupuncture, stretch therapy, all these different things to continue optimizing their health so they can not just look better, but you need to be able to feel better, move better, and be able to do things you love to do, especially when you finally retire and you have every day to enjoy. So my focus is to talk about how we can improve the aging process. And for me, that's mitochondria function. And today I'm going to talk more about mitochondria in a roundabout way. We're going to get to in a follow-up interview. We'll do this interview with Peter Defty of Vespa. We'll do 2-3 episodes on Fridays talking about the optimal fat metabolism and how Vespa works and mitochondria function, also intermittent fasting. So we didn't get that far today because got Peter talking about Vespa, and I like to ask questions along the way, so we'll have to follow up to get to the other questions I had today. But I just wanted to start with an intro on what Vespa Power is about. So if you go to vespapower.com, VESPA Power, you can learn a lot. And Peter's going to talk a little bit about the history of Vespa today and how it's a safe and natural way to enhance your athletic performance. So you're looking for those performance gains. Perhaps you have done the fat adaptation process, or maybe you're curious about it. You are coming from, the typical standard American diet, carb loading before a race and eating gels every hour. Well, you might want to go back and listen to my previous conversations with Peter about fat adaptation and how endurance athletes, as well as all athletes and individuals, we should be burning fat for our main fuel source at rest and at a higher percentage during exercise sessions and racing. So the more fat adapted you are, you can burn fat at higher percentages and spare glycogen stores until when you need it. So if you're sprinting to the finish line and doing an obstacle course race, or you're doing a CrossFit workout, you might need a little more carbohydrate fuel. If you're doing higher heart rate exercises, races, events, or you're competing to win your age group, you do need to step it up a notch. So how do we fuel during training for our bodies to be fat burning machines, and how do we eat day to day? It's a conversation we've had in previous podcasts, but I wanted to ask Peter today how Vespa works. So I'm coming from years of doing fasted workouts. I've been fat adapted since, 2005 when I started getting into all this stuff, metabolic efficiency testing and training and wearing heart rate monitors and learning about, eating more fat, low carb back in 2008 or 9. So how does Vespa work if it is a little bit more of a carb source, and how do we add it into our training? So Vespa is nature's catalyst for optimal fat metabolism, OFM. So Vespa jumpstarts your fat adaptation process by working with your body's physiology to tap into virtually unlimited energy stores of fat that we have in our bodies, if we get it to be available, instead of doing massive amounts of sugar and carbs. So if you are a high carb athlete, or you tend to depend on fat bombs, nut butters, MCT oil, and higher fat fuel sources for supplementing during training or racing, if you're a keto athlete, you might be looking at something that's in between. So you can use Vespa instead of a high sugar gel or MCT oil or ketones. So by tapping into your robust energy stores as your main energy source, you will avoid the energy swings and the multitude of GI symptoms that are common but not needed when trying to perform exercise, athletic endurance events, of all levels. And GI issues are not the normal. They're not something that we should just go, okay, that's part of the event. It is not normal. It's like saying it's part of the aging process. It is not normal. So, if you do have GI problems when you are training and racing, it could be bloated belly, diarrhea, gas, bloating, nauseousness, throwing up, any of those things can be related to GI stress because you're having the energy swings that you get from excessive carbohydrates and taking in maybe too much fat that your body can't digest when it's exercising. So N=1, you have to experiment and find out what works. But I was curious on how Vespa works based on a lot of Facebook friends mentioning they were using it in their races end of season this year and hearing great success stories from them. We've talked to Peter a lot about his OFM program, Optimal Fat Metabolism. So he says Vespa changes the paradigm for recovery through damage prevention. And you can recover faster using Vespa because shifting to use fat as your main fuel actually prevents the damage you can do with too much sugar that causes oxidative stress and the lactic load caused by that metabolizing sugar or glucose for excessive amount of people that take those gels every half hour and they just overload their body, dumping all that sugar in their systems. So Vespa is something that will help enhance our body's performance by adding that extra boost of energy that we may need when training and racing. So we all agree, Peter and I, and most of you, I'm sure, agree that we should be burning fat for metabolism and for training and fueling our endurance events. As humans are meant to metabolize fat as a primary aerobic energy source. And on their website, you can find out more information, but for over 20 years, they've said Vespa has pioneered results driven by performance, and they're trying to conduct more research studies to collect more data for those data-driven people. I rather experiment myself because I'm always questioning the research studies. Are they done on someone as myself? And often they're not. They're not done on women. They're not done on women my age and my same menstrual cycle and my same genetics. There's so much that goes into research studies. So it's difficult to say, oh, that's going to work exactly the same for me. So I do believe research is important, but I also think self-experimentation, N=1 study is a little more important than that. So for me to try Vespa, I'm going to attempt to race again next year, I want to figure out how I can optimize my performance by adding something in my race, or I'll practice with it in training that won't spike my blood sugar, because I'm very sensitive to glucose, and have too much sugar, it will definitely give me a headache in 5 seconds and I'll have stomach issues. So I'm very fat adapted, and I can have carbohydrates, but those simple sugars that come into packets that are used in training and racing do not work for me. So what can I use for fuel to give me the extra energy? I'll be experimenting with Vespa to see if it will help continue my body using fat for fuel. As they say, Vespa is a fat burning catalyst. So if it's going to work with my body's natural metabolic pathways, which are fat burning metabolisms function, that I think it should work. But you don't know until you try it on your own self. So it's not a lot of calories, it's not electrolyte replacement, and it's not an energy drink. So they say you won't feel a sugar high or a caffeine buzz. You won't feel the crashes either. Vespa works by optimizing our body's ability to derive its energy from a readily available and plentiful source to enhance athletic performance, recovery, and overall health, which is pretty much what I say in my tagline is burn fat, optimize health, which I keep replacing the word health means optimize mitochondria to me right now, and improve performance and longevity, as well as recoveries in there too a lot of times. So those are important things we need to think about. How can we enhance athletic performance? How can we improve and speed up recovery? How can we improve our overall health when we're doing this excessive chronic cardio that damages our cells and creates excess amount of oxidative stress, right? So what we're doing isn't beneficial, isn't really healthy for us. So how can you find that right amount, the Goldilocks effect of training and how we fuel and how often we race and what we're doing for our training programs that's not going to create more damage than good? So what they say with Vespa, we might notice, what you notice is what you don't notice. That's what he says. The ups and downs in the energy levels, the mental fog and lack of focus, impaired motor skills and coordination, being wrecked after a workout, food cravings, and DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness the following day. They're saying with Vespa, we won't have these experiences, as Vespa does not boost our performance, but instead it optimizes our natural potential. And Vespa's effects are subtle, but largely unnoticed in the conventional sense. Now, while the direct effects of tapping into your own natural fuel sources, your fat stores, are key to your endurance and performance, as well as your stamina, same thing as endurance, the indirect effects are just as critical. The shift of beta to beta oxidation and ketosis also produces a blood sugar stabilizing effect. So mental focus and motor skills, coordination remain razor sharp, allowing the athlete to be at top of their game for the entire event or competition. Also, significant amounts of less damage from oxidative stress that I was just mentioning, that I'm researching a lot about in the mitochondrial function. And lactate load can be directly felt in terms of significant lowered amounts of muscle soreness. Also, improved performance from carbohydrate intake using Vespa and the OFM program, which is Peter's optimal fat metabolism program. Athletes that he trains and he coaches consistently note that their fat adapted state increases the benefits from the carbohydrate intake as Vespa. So as I call it, when in the summertime I was telling you about how I'd bike and then I'd stop at a coffee shop because I wasn't racing. So I'll probably change my rule next year when I'm competing in Ironman, but I would stop and maybe have a gluten-free carb at a bakery sometimes if it was a 100-mile bike ride, and have F-bomb on it, or peely nut butter was my favorite. Put that on top of something, and then iced Americano with heavy cream. And that extra dose of carbohydrates, if there was gluten-free source, I try to avoid gluten, that gave me a boost. It was rocket fuel for me when I put it in at the end of my workout. So I had, say, another hour and a half to ride, and I'd like to do a time trial type of finish to my long bike rides in the spring and summer. So, having that optimal fat metabolism is important. And when you put the timing of your carbohydrates, when you place them in your training and race day, is really the secret sauce to improving your performance. And with Vespa, it'll be great to experiment with it because carbs work better, he says, and they're stronger, and using less carbs when you use Vespa. You just don't need the extra carbohydrates besides what's in Vespa. So part of that problem of people having too many carbohydrates have a lot of GI issues, and that's the whole story behind UCAN, behind S fuels, behind Vespa and OFM. I think is how to improve performance. A lot of that is spend less time throwing up and sitting on the toilet and having disaster pants when you're in a race, right? That's how you improve your performance. You don't have that GI stress. You're not running porta potty to porta potty and feeling better when you get the throw up out of you. If you eliminate that GI stress by having a steady flow of energy, not having the energy, blood sugar highs and lows and the crashes that you get from having too much of the sugar, especially if you're fat adapted as myself and you're metabolically efficient, well, having a little Vespa, right amount of timing into my workouts might be a good little source of rocket fuel. So Vespa, Peter says, is nature's catalyst to enhance athletic performance. So will it help us? What is Vespa? We'll talk more to Peter about it, but it's a blend of naturally occurring, minimally processed ingredients from bees and wasps. So it's made up of honey, propolis, royal jelly, and wasp extract, which is why you can understand it's a little bit more expensive than a typical glucose gel. So having those royal jelly and a wasp extract is going to be a little more expensive, but you get what you pay for, I always say. And if you want that magic sauce to improve your performance in training a race day, and if it helps reduce oxidative stress, I'm on board. I'll spend whatever I need to improve the aging process and do less damage to my cells than I already have. So the key to metabolizing the fat metabolizing catalyst is the Wasp Extract Peptide, derived from an Asian mandarin wasp, Vespa madrina, one of nature's most potent endurance and performance animals. This wasp flies between 70 to 100 kilometers per day in search of food and carries half its body weight to its entire carries half its body weight to its entire body weight. I think there's a typo. His food back to the colony to feed to the larva. Now, the adult wasp does not eat the solid food. Rather, it receives a liquid containing the wasp extract peptide from the larva in a symbiotic relationship. This allows the adult wasp to metabolize the fats stored in its thorax. Geez, this is amazing how they'd ever figure this out. In turn, the adult wasp feeds the larva a food ball, usually composed of other insects. Yum. Keto carnivore people might like that. So it's composed of the insects the wasp has preyed upon, and it's chewed food into a food ball using its own powerful mandibles, its type of teeth. Because all animal cells are similar across species, the ingredients in Vespa exert their fat-burning influence in human cells. Isn't that crazy? So you can learn all about it and read it again on vespapower.com. And they have a great tab. You can click Why Vespa, and then under there's frequently asked questions, and you can learn more where to buy it. But Peter's going to talk shop, and we're just going to have a great conversation. He's on, he'll tell you where he is. He's in his car on the side of the road in the mountains. So enjoy the show. I just wanted to give you a little bit more information on Vespa because we really didn't get to it. We just kind of talked away and just organically flowing conversation. We'll do a follow-up on intermittent fasting and mitochondrial optimization and get more into oxidative stress. So let's bring Peter on and let's talk shop. Enjoy. Hey guys, it's Debbie, and I'm doing another podcast with Peter Defty on Vespa today, and we're going to hopefully talk about different ways you can improve your performance and your longevity. As we all get a little bit older, longevity is my main focus, not just my performance these days. So, Peter, thanks for coming on the show today.
Pleasure to be on there with you today again, Debbie.
What's that?
Pleasure to be on again with you.
Thank you. And you are in your car in the mountains, so we've got good reception for being stuck in the snowy weather.
I can literally, I'm literally 200 yards from a bunch of cell towers. That's why I stopped here. The traffic's like barely moving. It's like both lanes of I-15 through the Cohen Pass are like stop and go, and it's like, oh, I'll never get down to San Bernardino to be able to do this podcast. So I stopped here, got set up, and as you can see, I'm on time and everything's working.
Yeah. See, you guys, this is dedication here. This is passion, purpose, and how we're creating impact and doing this free service for you.
we got to make it happen. That's right.
Yeah. So we're on a mission to help educate other athletes how to improve their performance and longevity, but also, improving the cellular health. I'm all about mitochondrial health and optimization. So first topic we're going to dive into is something we keep talking about online on the different Facebook group pages, and a lot of questions come up about this. Vespa and optimal fat metabolism, and we're really working on, what we're doing now, looking at the year ahead, looking at a race season, and talk about what Vespa is and we can kind of talk about how to get our performance improved in 2020 race season. What are things we can start doing now?
Okay, well, yeah, I'm the general manager of Vespa, so I do have a financial interest, and oddly enough, I get accused of that quite a bit, but my financial interest so far has been me putting money into the company and going into debt, because it's been, as you know, we've been around a long time, Debbie, and it's been a hard road because people are very skeptical of the product because it comes from a completely different angle, and we're not using calories, and we haven't developed a bunch of formal science, which we can talk about later, but it's based on the science of nature, not the man-made lab. And it's a natural catalyst that increases your fat oxidation. And this, I got into Vespa because I was already doing fat adaptation. So I was very open to the product when it was first introduced to me, and it worked for me very well. And since then, we've had all kinds of, literally thousands of athletes using the product and swearing by it. But one of the things that people are out there throwing rocks at is, oh, where's the science? Where's the science? And so I want to kind of counter that a little bit, because the people who are demanding the science and saying, well, there's no study, that shows to me that a fundamental sort of knowing just enough about science to be dangerous, because science begins with observation. And yes, I'm not saying we shouldn't have a study, but just the fact that there is no study does not necessarily mean it doesn't work, and everybody cast out on that. So you have to be skeptical yet open at the same time when you're approaching any kind of new concept.
Well, I don't really look at the science for a lot of things. I just come
I know you don't, but if there's a natural basis, but that's the big thing. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and one of the commentators used to use Vespa a lot and knows it works, but their whole thing was we're not going to recommend something without the science.
Yeah, people want science. I understand that. I mean, people want research to prove that it works in scientific studies. But my problem always is, who are the studies on? Are they males ages 20 to 24, and they are doing whatever sport?
Well, and supplement studies, this is where what I say is about people know just enough about science. Everybody wants to be sciencey because it kind of gives you that aura of authority. And like you and I admit, we don't have a big, strong science background, but that's the thing, is like everybody wants to be sciencey, but they're showing me they don't know, because I'm around people who do good basic research science, and nutritional supplement studies for sports are notoriously bad. I would easily say 90% of the studies that come out, if you understood experimental design, if you understood that correlation isn't causation, if you understood statistics, these things don't even qualify as science. Yet you put them out in a study, a published study, all of a sudden everybody thinks, oh, it's science.
Yeah.
And yet, like I said, science begins with observation, and Vespa is an accidental discovery of nature, where some Japanese entomologists were studying this Asian hornet. By the way, they're coming into Washington, so watch out.
Oh.
Canada. Yeah.
Really?
Anyway, yeah. And they were seeing that it flew, 60, 70, and up to 100 kilometers a day, and carried a third of its weight in a food ball back to feed to the larva. It's like, how does it do this? And plus, it had to kill whatever it was getting for the food ball, because it's a very aggressive predatory wasp. And often, just like humans being apex predators, it's one of the apex predators in the insect world. It'll take on insects and small mammals, rodents, many times its size, just like humans did. So
let's back up though. So I think, to explain, if people aren't familiar with what Vespa is, in the website, it's vespapower.com. And when you open the website, it says, start tapping into your boundless energy the way nature intended, without a restrictive diet. And that Vespa is all natural, stimulant-free product that harnesses your own body fat so you can reach your health and performance potential. So talk about what that even means for people that are new.
And that's the thing. So back to my little etymology thing, and I won't go too deep, but they studied what the physiology was, and these like ants, bees, wasps, and termites all use this same mechanism called trophaxis. And the larva feeds a peptide to the adult, and then the adult gives it food. So it's a symbiotic relationship between two life stages. And that peptide activates fat in its thorax for high level, high intensity, and sustainable energy. And so these Japanese entomologists theorize, well, animal cells are remarkably similar across species. Over 90% of the DNA is the same. And so they theorize, well, if this peptide can exert this influence in bees, wasps, ants, and termites, it would do it in like rats and mice and humans. And they did some studies and were able to show that. But there were some problems with the experimental design and some of the things in it. So I don't put that up, because it's not really that good science. And I want to do impeccable science. So think of Vespa as a catalyst to tap into your own internal energy sources, which is fat, and we have this virtually unlimited stores of energy on us. And the thing that's that made me open to Vespa and then develop OFM around Vespa was this simple fact that the reason we have tons of fat calories is that's our aerobic energy source.
Stored fat energy.
Yes, stored fat, and intermuscular fat, intermuscular triglycerides, liver fat. That's there for energy. And glycogen is our fight or flight fuel. And we've gotten it so backwards by trying to use our fight or flight fuel for aerobic fuel. So we're meant to burn fat aerobically. And as the faster study showed, humans can burn a lot more fat at a lot higher intensity than the science, which was based on high carbs, said was even possible.
Hey, I have a question on that. I'm reading Dr. Stacy Sims' book on ROAR and the differences of women in athletic performance, but was the faster study, were there any females in that study?
They started to want to have some females. We were getting some female candidates ready, but based on budget, time constraints, they just kept it to males, because it would have been it would have been a whole nother study to get a cohort of high carb female athletes and high carb, low carb, fat adapted athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a difference in that's one of the things I focus a lot on, because females are much more challenging, shall we say, in a good way, but it's a lot more difficult for a female for a lot of different reasons. But females are actually, this is why I disagree with Stacy on some of this stuff. It's harder to get a female to get really well adapted, and some do better than others. But if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, females' hunger triggers are more sensitive. They put it on faster and take it off slower. But yet there's a reason for that, and it is around ketosis and fat adaptation. It's the big party for a woman. A woman is actually more suited for ketosis than a man, because late gestation, childbirth, and lactation, a female is, from an evolutionary standpoint, they're compromised at hunting and gathering. You need to be self-sufficient as a default. You can't depend on the male to be around. And I think that's why a lot of women, as our brains grew, women's brains grew around creating these societies and clans, and how women work together to do these things. But that's the point, is at that point, in terms of what nature has got women planned to do, it's all about ketosis.
Well, that's what I looked at. This is a whole different subject, so we'll get too off course, but just for women and athletes and their women's cycles, what she's talking about. But a lot of the things that she said is, after, it's a whole nother topic. So we're going to do a show just on this with Aaron Carson and Dina Griffin. We're going to dive into it. But I think one thing I'll just throw out there, that as people age for women, and especially postmenopausal, she did mention that they are more carb sensitive. So they need more protein and fat. And because of their loss of hormones as they get older, they need to supplement with more protein, amino acids, she said, leucine before and after workouts, and having fats. But then her food suggestions kind of threw me off, because they're like egg whites and stuff like that. So it's like, wait a minute. So
you need to have the fat. This is one of the things I've been discussing a lot with people. You don't need ketogenic levels of fat, but you need fat with the protein source in order to assimilate the protein. And these numbers, it's way more complicated than just saying you need X amount of protein, because if you have the protein, like if you're having protein, like in a low fat whey protein shake, you need a lot more protein, and most of that protein is going to be made into glucose than made into protein. Whereas if you have a nice juicy steak or a nice whole egg omelet, because of that fat, you're going to assimilate a lot more of that protein into muscle tissue.
It's more keto carnivore.
Yeah, well, not necessarily keto carnivore, but just
real food.
Real food. That's, when I tell people to eat protein, I say real food protein sources, because all your real food protein sources pretty much have plenty of fat that goes with them. Whole eggs, fatty cuts of meat, chicken or duck with the skin on it, salmon, things like that. They all have significant amount of fat with them, and that's key, because all your protein assimilation and synthesis is done via lipoproteins, which is a fat protein matrix. That's what cholesterols are, bundles of lipoproteins.
So I always keep responding people in these annoying Facebook groups. It's just, you wanted to scream at everyone. Just everybody's different. And the main goal is to eat real food that balances your blood sugar. And I could say that probably to every comment on there. It's like your main goal is to have your stabilize your blood sugar. So Vespa, going back to Vespa, just how does it help people balance their blood sugar, and how do we implement it?
Interesting you say that. I've got a good example because I was actually talking to a guy who's a pretty big trainer, and his wife is sort of, I think she's kind of out there on social media. Her name's Stacy Clark. His name is Chris Clark, and they're Tiger training up in Minnesota. And we were talking about this exact thing because his kid just signed on as a pro soccer player. And Vespa, without making any changes, Vespa is going to increase your fat oxidation rate. And in terms of blood sugar, it's what I call, it makes your blood sugar stable. And this is one of the things that Vespa users notice, is they notice their mental focus and their motor skills are real sharp when they're on the Vespa. And a good example of this is in 2002, we sponsored Alexei Yagudin, who's a Russian figure skater. And then in 2018, we Yuzuru Hanewaka or something like that, Japanese guy, another figure skater. They both won the gold medals with perfect scores at the Olympics. And in 2002, Alexei actually won every competition he entered, the world competition, the European competition. I mean, he just won everything. And he was training and so a men's figure skating is only 4 minutes long, the long program. And so, but it's, it's super high bursts of energy, super sharp, focus and motor skills. And that's what they found, is they could train longer, because in figure skating, the coach watches the athlete. And as soon as they get sloppy, they have to pull them off the ice, because they'll either do the move wrong or they'll fall and hurt themselves. So figure skating is a good way of illustrating how blood sugar stable you are, because your blood sugar, when your blood sugar starts to drift down, you'll start to lose focus. The very fine, like that in the zone, super on it, focus and motor skills before you even sense fatigue.
So when do you take it? So you're taking it for athletes, whatever sport you're doing. Is there a certain timing?
Take it 30 to 45 minutes before. And if you're doing endurance athletes, our recommended window is, if you're going out for 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours or longer, you want to take it every 2 to 2.5 hours.
And then for swimmers, as we talked before one time about these competitive swimmers at, high school, college level, states championship, I was watching, they have these swim meets. I was watching them, and they, have an hour break, and then they go again, and they, have these all out events that are just insane. Then I was curious if, wouldn't Vespa work for those swimmers?
It absolutely does. I've got several high school swimmers that they PR'd and did great using Vespa. And here's the thing, again, just like the figure skating, it's as important to use it in practice as it is in competition, because swimming, the competitions are like, boom, they're totally glycolytic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
right?
They were all out.
They're all out. But yet when you look at them train, that's got to be aerobic, because you don't spend
3 hours in the pool.
Yeah, in the pool, looking at a line, going back and forth at fairly high levels, right?
Yep.
But so it's one of these things where it's kind of an interesting dichotomy, because I helped out a gal, and she won the gold medal in the last Summer Olympics. Britt Helmsley, she's with the Australian team. Anyway, that's what she noticed. So she could just train better, and she didn't have the GI issues. That's the other thing, is with Vespa, by making that fundamental switch to fat as fuel, you're not going to need as many calories, so you're not putting a load on your digestive tract. And then, that's the GI issues go away, the bonking go away. And as you and I both know, endurance sports, it's sort of like people think it's normal. It's a rite of passage, a badge of honor to puke, to have GI distress, to bonk. And, it's not necessary. You don't need to be wrecked after a race. So go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to finish what you're saying, then I had a question to follow up on that.
So the FASTER study showed that people were able to burn over a gram of fat. And the guy who burned the most. John Rutherford, he burned 1.78 grams a minute. So all the low carb guys were burning well over a gram a minute. But what's interesting is we're starting to develop some data, and there is some data out there on a certain 48-year-old ultra runner named Jeff Browning, who's at the top of the sport. Do you know him? Know his name, Debbie? Anyway, Jeff's 48 years old. He's one of the top mountain 100 specialists. He was the oldest guy to finish in the top 10 at Western States, in which everybody went under 16 hours this year. It's like, and he ran.
Crazy.
Yeah, actually, at 48 years old, he ran the fastest split from Forest Hill to the finish.
See, 48-year-olds. That's how old I am. There's hope for me.
Yeah. So 48 years old, and the two front runners, Jim Walmsley, who set the course record that day, he and Jared Hazen were racing for first and second. So they were hammering each other, and Jeff still ran the fastest split in the last 38 miles.
Wow.
So it's crazy. Anyway, he's got some data on him that he's at 2.22 grams a minute of fat
burning
oxidation.
That much fat.
And he's not a big guy, there's some pretty interesting things we're seeing that isn't in the science. And in fact, when we did a test with Jeff, we did this at Utah State University, and one of the professors was kind enough to run these VO2 max tests, but it was just after the semester ended, and some of the other professors filtered in the room, and they just stood there and stared, and they were like, their jaws dropped, and they said, "This isn't happening. We have to rewrite the textbooks. I've never seen this before."
Yeah, like, that's a novel idea. Rewrite the textbooks if they're able to do that. Ever do that?
They were like stunned because they were seeing it happen live, and they said, if I didn't know Edric, the professor who was conducting the test, to calibrate the machinery and all, they said we'd think you did something wrong with the calibration because this isn't supposed to happen.
So,
go ahead.
How is this working on for people just starting out, if they're beginners, not professional, these ultra runners and, tops Olympic level athletes? Talk about just the age grouper that wants to do an endurance event next year, or maybe a different, not necessarily a triathlon, a running race, but we want to optimize their fat metabolism, which you talk about on your OFM site, and how we need to change what we're eating now and when we're eating. We'll talk next podcast. We'll do a different day on intermittent fasting. And then, how should we be training now in the off season to optimize our fat metabolism? And then, implementing Vespa in our training. So when we're ready to go on our A race, we're feeling
that's a good point. Vespa is a good tool to help jumpstart fat metabolism and get those benefits right away, because and I know, frankly, a lot of people, when they hear about fat adaptation, they instantly go keto. They think keto, and they said, I can't do keto. I'm not going to do it. Right? How many people have you heard that from?
Well,
right?
And I'm speaking at KetoCon this year, by the way, to how to improve your performance longevity for the athlete. So I have to dispel some myths.
Yeah. And so it's a good way, using Vespa is a good way to get started and get some of those benefits. And back to your point about women being different, Vespa is also going to be good because you're going to improve your fat metabolism. And anytime you can improve your fat metabolism, and I'm talking in generalities, not specifics, but overall, the more fat adapted you are, the more you get that working right, the more hormonally balanced you're going to be. Because hormones are made by lipoproteins and fats, not by carbohydrates. And, cholesterol. So, and that's what cholesterol is made out of. So when you get people fat adapted physiological, when you teach them to manage their stress levels, you get them aerobically fit by working out. I have so many women come to me and they'll tell me how much better they feel, particularly in that mid-luteal through menses stage, that special time of month. And the other thing that's happened probably 3 or 4 times with certain people I know is getting them fat adapted. They wind up, as they say in Australia, they wind up falling pregnant.
Because their hormones work.
Because all of a sudden their hormones would come online. And one of the gals I helped out, the best that's most famous, is Nell Stephenson, the paleoista. She wasn't planning on having kids, and bam,
Body started working. Once you get that good fat in your body, stress.
Yeah, and right, and you get the good fat, and your body's taking that good fat and using it the way it's meant to. The hormones really get going in a way that help the female really function well in any stage of their life, whether they're in their childbearing years and menstruating, particularly fat adaptation and using Vespa is particularly important during perimenopause. Had some women where they'd go back to cycling regular, or at least their symptoms went way down. I have one gal who was in her 50s, and she actually got pregnant, but she didn't know she was pregnant and then miscarried. She did Lake Placid, missed a cutoff, and then 3 days later she miscarried.
Oh.
You know, she had a real heavy period, and then she realized, and she's a doctor, and then she realized, oh my God, now I know why I felt the way I felt. Felt just like when I was pregnant with my daughter. And but you know, at 53 years old, she wasn't expecting to get pregnant, so totally caught her by surprise. Yeah.
So I have a question.
So there's that other hope for you too, if you're not careful.
I do not want to get pregnant. No, thank you. I enjoy my freedom. That'd be a shock. So there's a fear, I think, Vespa is, people think of it as sugar because there's, you know, honey and there's some carb. What's in it? Is it in the orange juice? Orange?
Well, the junior has some orange juice and honey. And let's just speak to, this is where people react in the keto. Apparently the keto people get on this way. It's got 5 grams of carbohydrate in it, less than 5 grams. Mm-hmm. 5 grams is, you know, it's a teaspoon. It's insignificant. We're talking 19 calories.
So that's the thing. So that's my question. So you've got 3 different camps. I'm writing my thoughts. So you've got the people that, all right, less is more. I'm going to fast. I'm not having anything because I'm so fat adapted. I don't need to have any boost energy while I work out, 2-3 hour run. I don't need to take anything, bike ride, whatever. And then there's people that are still the sugar burners, going to take, you know, a gel every 30 minutes and take their liquid 300 calories of sugar, carbohydrates, and, you know, they're overdosing. So they're doing more. And then there's people that are doing fat adapted. And then you listen to them read their posts that they're taking ketone supplement while they're doing a workout, and they're having some olives or sucking down, you know, MCT oil. So I think it's kind of, how does Vespa help people? If you're trying to burn fat for fuel, you want to improve performance, and you want to improve the aging process, which means less oxidative stress.
Well, like one of the things, if you're doing training, you're not doing really hard, just taking Vespa and going fasted and just maintaining electrolyte balance, fluid and electrolyte balance, is all you need to do. And you'll be amazed how little you'll need. If you're racing, I tend to recommend, unless it's like really cold and you need those compact calories, those really dense calories, I tend to steer people away from the fat-based fuels when you're racing, because the digestive load is huge, because your body, especially in the heat, you can't digest food in the heat. And so you have to have something that's simple. So I tend to steer people to relatively, you know, the normal stuff people take for carbohydrate and sugar-based fuels. And my rules for athletes on race day is 3 things. Use what you like, what you know works, and what's available.
Yeah, nothing new race day.
Yeah, well, yeah, but even, you know, sometimes something might be new because that's all that's available at an aid station table and you dropped your stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's like you shouldn't stress about it, because, you know, if you're taking in so much less when you're using the Vespa that it really isn't going to matter. Like if you're taking in, like you say, like you're taking in 2 or 3 gels an hour and there's a flavor that's going to make you hurl, you darn sure don't want to take that, right? Yeah. You don't want to do nothing new on race day. Exactly. But I tend to steer people away from MCT oils, because a lot of people have found out MCT oils can literally go right through you. Mm-hmm. I tend to shy away from anything that's got a big digestive cost. Like one of the problems with UCAN is if you have it too strong and take too much in the heat, people get bloating, gas, and worse. And that's a very common thing that people experience on you can in the heat. In the cool, it works fine. But in the heat, that can be a problem because the way it works is it transits the gut slowly, so it doesn't give you that glucose spike. But in the heat, if your digestive tract is shut down, it'll sit there and it'll start to ferment.
So this
And
will
then,
spike your
yeah,
blood sugar up when you're taking Vespa, though. So you're not having that
yeah,
spike and low, so you won't have that GI distress or the bonking like you're
right,
just. I interrupted you, but
right. You won't have the, yeah, and you're not taking in all the gels, and you're not putting that digestive cost. Making, you don't want to do caffeine in the heat because all that digestive cost, because basically, particularly in the heat, your body's trying to produce energy and thermoregulate mainly, and so it's on that ragged edge. And if you try to eat something, your body either can't process it, it'll start to ferment and you have the GI distress, or it'll start to send some blood from your cooling, and then you can't cool well, and then you blow up from the heat, or you have to slow way down. It's just a complicated matrix you're working with when
yeah.
you're trying to race in the heat, and most people, tend to train and race in fairly warm temperatures. I mean, you want to target fall races, but let's face it, a lot of times we don't have ideal race conditions.
Well, yeah, you want, I mean, when I'm doing triathlons, I want a nice warmer weather climate because I don't want to freeze to death in water and
Right.
be cold on the bike ride because my hands and everything shuts down. So warm weather races, I think triathlons are a little more popular, but you never know what you get race day.
Yep.
So the optimal fat metabolism, how does that work with Vespa?
Well, it's a program that I developed to support Vespa athletes to get the best value out of it, but it's out of Vespa because Vespa is not a cheap product because the ingredients are relatively expensive. Since, but it's taken on a life of its own because I started to go into these deep rabbit holes of researching the physiology and trying to understand how to do it. It's like, oh, there's a lot more going on here than just cutting the carbs. There's things like vitamin D levels, there's stress levels, there's cycling the carbs in and out. I could go on and on and on about all the different things you really got to do. There's another big thing is getting nutritional balance. I don't worry, like you hear all this talk about nutritional density and all that, but I'm more about the balance because, when we're talking about the audiences we're mainly talking to, when it's athletes, they're pretty keyed in on their health. So most people, if they're doing a whole foods type of diet, the nutrient density is there, just by default. They're not eating mac and cheese.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
Right.
they're doing keto mac and cheese.
Yeah. But, right. But they're, what I'm saying? It's like you're having, whole food, natural protein sources, fresh vegetables and fruits in season, eggs, things like that. The nutrient density is definitely there. It's getting that balance right and one of my key things is, doing what I call whole animal eating, which means you consume the organ meat.
Yeah.
Yep. Nose to tail. Yeah. And you're getting the skin and connective tissue. So yeah, I know. And most people are like you, Debbie. They're not going to do it. I love to eat all that stuff.
Yeah. Danny Vega, I've podcasted with him. He's a friend of mine now, and he eats all of it, everything, and cooks organ awful burgers and does all that stuff. So I get that, but it's not what I'm doing.
Right. Well, what I do with 80-90% of my athletes, I put them on liver capsules and gelatin collagen supplements. Yeah. And it works just fine. And in fact, this is one of the things we should get to, though. The next thing about OFM is I'm a real less is more. Once you get that balance right, I'm less is more, because what we found is when you get that whole animal eating nutrient balanced right and a little bit of the nutrition you get from vegetables, and just get everything just right, it's amazing how little you need to eat.
Well, that's our topic we're going to have to do in another episode, but we can just touch on it. The intermittent fasting is natural. And I think that's what your blog post that we'll put in the show notes, and we'll go do another podcast next week about. But it's when you eat the right for your metabolic type and for your body energy and your lifestyle.
And your sport,
your sport, your genetics. I find it's no brainer. It's not even intentional that I do one big meal a day. And
I know it just happens.
Now, middle afternoon to eat, and then it's Friday, but usually weekdays, Sunday through Thursday, I don't eat again, and it's so simple.
Yeah, exactly. And when you do eat, like when you're in that phase, and you got dialed into one meal and maybe a snack or a coffee with cream in it, it's like
for sure.
if you eat that second meal, it's like you feel terrible because you feel like, oh God, you know.
Well, I find if I eat before bed, I was doing a different podcast on my Wednesday show about health building, that I can't eat before bed, and especially protein, because I just started eating protein. If I don't take about 10 HCl betaine supplements and digestive enzymes, I can't break down the protein very well. And then if I eat too close to bed that you're going to go lie down, I get sick and I have problems. So I can throw it up. So TMI, but I think if you eat too close to bed, I don't know how people can eat and then lie down and not have everything come back up because it's not able to digest properly.
Well, one of the greatest ways, if you don't have if you can only get a nap in, get fat adapted and then eat a bunch of carbs with your meal. And you'll like I do. I've been doing this recently. I've noticed if I have some carbs, it's like I get this, because I'm well fat adaptive. If I have some carbs with that meal, it's like 45 minutes later, I get this carb coma and I'm like out.
Secret trick. Or I get a headache in 5 minutes. But so just last thing, just touch on, and we'll put everything in the show notes to link them to your blogs. But the Beyond Keto and strategic carbohydrate use, so the carbohydrates work like taking out caffeine and putting it back in. Same thing with carbohydrates. If you remove them and then put them back in, it's like this extra engine boost, rocket fuel that you'll get in training and then a race day too. So that's kind of how I think of OFM and Vespa and how this all works, and how we need to start working on this process now in the beginning of the year, your off season, to become fat adapted by how you eat and how you train and when you eat with intermittent fasting. But the strategic carbohydrate use, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, and you talk about this a lot too, Debbie, is be mindful and aware, but don't stress about it. Go have a good time. This is the time of year people have parties. Don't be on edge about what you're eating, what you're drinking. Just go and have a good time, because if you're just mindful and aware, you're not going to go binge on beer and pizza or mac and cheese. Most people who once they get on some decent food, they know what crap does to them.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I do with people once they get fat adapted and they're doing well. About 3 or 4 months in, I'll tell them to go have beer and pizza.
Go cheat and you feel like crap.
And you feel like crap. They're constipated, stiff, sore. Yes, not worth it, right? So enjoy the holidays. Don't stress, and then try to fast because you're overeating when you do have these social events. But don't stress about it, because the stress, as Debbie stresses as well as I stress, the stress has got a huge physiological impact, is the carbs. So you just want to be relaxed and just know you'll be prepared, and then get fat adapted. And thanks Debbie for plugging the Vespa. I don't do a very good job, but yeah,
that's what I'm here for.
The Vespa is a great tool for helping you get into that fat adapted state, or just experience it. Like some of the athletes that, like, I've gotten recently athletes from two ways. Some of them are people who use Vespa and they get the benefits of Vespa and they want more, so we put them on OFM. Then other people are coming from the keto camp and they've heard about Vespa, they've heard about OFM because keto will impair your top end performance. So they're looking for the, they've been playing with keto a long time. They're finding, they're getting the benefits of keto, but they just don't have that top gear. So they come to us for that. And then that's where So the Vespa, when we do a hard reset, which is like you go really low on carbs and physiology, we use the Vespa to attenuate hunger and get people off snacking. So it's a product that it's a tool you can use to help attenuate the hunger, especially if you stay ahead of, like, say, if you know you snack at 10 and 3, at 9 and 2, you take a Vespa and get off the snacking, and as you said, we'll talk about intermittent fasting. Be mindful and try to do intermittent fasts. Don't worry about alcohol. Just if you're fat adapted, alcohol is fine, especially if you're an athlete.
Well, this is coming out after New Year's, so they'll be on January 3rd, this post. So people are going to be all about dieting and not drinking alcohol until Super Bowl.
But that's the thing. Now all the holiday festivities are now strung out all the way to Super Bowl, because you've got Christmas, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, and then you got the playoff. Then you got all the bowl games, and then the playoffs, and then the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ongoing. That's what I have, this 5-day jumpstart, my 30-day program. People are always, I don't know when to do it. I've got this going, that going. Like, yeah. And that's how we learn how to go to parties and enjoy yourself. And this isn't a diet. It's a new way of eating, and it's a lifestyle that's easy to be adapted. A
great strategy for all those bowl games and playoffs and the Super Bowl is do a light workout. Take a Vespa, do a light workout before you go to your thing, because the combination of the Vespa and the light workout, because when you do a light workout, you're telling your body, oh, we're getting ready to work out, so we need more energy. So it'll start to release all that fat in the circulation. And the combination of the Vespa and that will really blunt your hunger going into, say, a playoff or a Super Bowl party.
So doing a light workout versus higher intensity interval training workout?
Exactly. And by the way, Debbie, that's one of the things I have women do. Is a woman who's sedentary, they get very peckish, but if they do light work, like cleaning the house or a light mobility workout or going for a walk,
stereotype there, women clean house. You better change that example. What I know.
That's why women clean house? Because men don't. We're slobs. So I'm not trying to be a
sexist. Just
sexist
kidding.
Male shower's pig. Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? It's like just get at women. It's really important for women to maintain activity and be engaged, because their primal higher hardwiring about those hunger triggers.
Ghrelin and leptin?
Well, not just ghrelin, leptin, and insulin. That's an interesting dance, but just even the psychological hardwiring. If they're, it's like Ben Franklin said in Poor Richard's Almanac, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. And for a woman, it goes right to that primitive thing about eating. I mean, like I say to people, the problem is it's the environment. Like, we have this hardwiring to want to eat. It's just we can attenuate it through getting fat adapted, and doing all these strategies. But the reason we have such a strong hunger trigger, in particular women, is because that's what's got us off our butts in the old days to hunt and gather. We needed that overarching hunger, otherwise we wouldn't be there. But the problem is now we don't have to do all that physical activity to do that. And I was talking on my run with Randy on Christmas morning. Randy and I ran up to the towers. We were talking about that. So it's like when we're training and we're doing pretty good at our training, we're barely at that base level of what evolution had us doing. So say you're training 8 to 10 hours a week, 12 hours a week. That's barely what our ancestors did.
Yep. Not 20, 30 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Worked out and sat. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But but what got us to do that, right? We're lazy for a reason. It's the hunger trigger that got us up to go and do all that work.
Yeah.
That survival mode. We didn't have a choice, and we didn't go to the supermarket or go through the drive-through. We had to do that to survive. So that's why we have this really strong hunger trigger. This is why women have it. They're eating and saving for two, as I say, because they're the ones that give life. We're the expendable ones. There's a section statement for you.
But a fact.
Yeah, so, we're definitely not worth it.
No, that's not true. So we're out of time today, but VespaPower.com is where we can send people to. And then you've got OFM.io is the OFM website.
How's your supply? You need some, right?
Yeah, I haven't been training. I'll start picking it up, and I'm supposed to
email me your mailing shipping addy so I can have Pam send just about.
Thank you.
Get back up.
Well, I'll let you get off into the snowy roads out there, and we'll talk to you next time. We'll talk about intermittent fasting, and then we've got my favorite new topic, mitochondria optimization.
And that's what OFM's all about. We're going to talk about
that's
the key about that. So I'm off to Phoenix to run 100K. So
okay, enjoy.
Got to do it.
All right, you keep it up. Thank you.
I got to set a good example.
Yeah, you do. Practice what you preach.
Okay, thanks, Debbie.
All right, have a good New Year.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.